And I will share my screen.
Please clearly give rise to the bodhicitta, the mind of enlightenment, that undertakes the Dharma activities of listening, contemplating, and meditating in order to free all beings, our dear mothers, infinite in number, from the ocean of suffering that is samsara, and establish them in the unsurpassed state of Buddhahood. And with that motivation, please listen to the teachings of the genuine Dharma.
Sangigi sungrap dodanga tham jegi ningbu chikdu dilwe che tagu chishi.
Of all the possible topics of Dharma to which we could be listening, we are listening to the very quintessence of the excellent speech of the Buddhas, of the sutras and the tantras, called the Four Dharmas of Gampopa.
Tene tagu chishi said in Sangigi dodanga tham je ningbu chikdu dilne any sixinala dine sumbare. That did over the Nimbo chick the Tilgo the Karelana. Telling around so doing me Simje Chetung Tung. Any Lodro Chung Chung Zula any Juk Law Sangigi Che Tamje La any Juk Law Young Ashido. Telling Nimbo Tilne Sumare. Tene 나도 최동동나 노래 충충이다 드니 개침보라 주객이 드세요 말에 주객이 네바양 요 말에 진단더니 닝부 수들고 말에 진리다 우리 뭐 책이더니 직신하라 들려서 말에.
What does it mean to say that these four lines, one verse of only 4 lines condenses absolutely all of the teachings of the Buddha in the sutras and the tantras to their very essence. What it means is that this very quintessence of all the Buddha's teachings is being presented so that when the time is such that sentient beings have relatively short lives, relatively limited mental capacity, and still wish to engage the Dharma, there be a quintessence, a brief, concise statement that allows these beings to engage the Buddha Dharma with ease. So we are at that time when we wish to engage the Dharma, but our lives are short and the mental capacity is relatively limited. And our ability to engage the Dharma is thus very limited as well. So this 4-line verse composed by Gampopa is a way to provide commentary for the full range of the Buddha's teachings to enable us to engage it with ease.
안도 뉴뉴메 심제디 세동동레 시제 넘버니 망보레 세네 윤동 시제 넘버망 세 세경 지점 미시베 세 윤동동디양 유릉보 윤동동 가서 예레 세 녀바요 말이었습니다. 로숨줄로 십줄로 납줄로 두주 타지도 녀바요 말에 윤동동디양더니 지점이 방녀바요 말에 세네 윤동 시제 넘버망 세 세경 지점 미시베 디엔디드니 나도 담비치 개침볼라니 주역이 뜻이 싫어요 말해서 디엔디드니 나도 닝보트 들고 그래서 ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਕੰਡੇ ਲੰਨ ਨੰਗ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਹਮਲ ਨੇ ਬਤਾਰਸ ਪਹਿਲੀ ਨੰਗਵਾਲ ਪੇ ਚਾਰਾ ਨੰਗਬਦੀ ਛੁਦ ਹਮਨੀ ਟਿਟ ਤਾਂਸ਼ਾਨਾ ਨੰਗਬਦੀ ਹਮਦ ਲੈਂਗਰੇ ਇਨ ਛੁਦੀ ਬਾ ਦੁਰਗਰੇ ਐਸ ਪੇ ਦਿਡਵਦਨੇ ਨੰਜ਼ੋ yang 직 자침볼라드니 주게기 드세요 말에 세통도를 되니까 이니 닝보디 술래 어만낭신기 닝보디 술래 이니 직 자침보디 바 두르고 그래서 랑기 데바 당들 랑르기 예수
The Lord Atisha said something to the same effect, that when the lifespan of beings is very short, it is necessary to present the Dharma in a very rich, condensed way, so that like the swan, which in legend has it is able to separate milk from water in a blend of the two, individuals can extract the very essence of the Dharma from the vast array of teachings. So what this means is that when we speak of a short lifespan, this refers to a time such as now, when it's not possible to really fix a specific amount of years that beings live. We could say that beings might live 50 years, 60 years, 70, 80 years. There's no fixed time frame. And in that respect, it means that there isn't a lot of extra time to engage the genuine Dharma with specificity in its full range. So when that is the case, what's necessary is a way to explain the very essence, the quintessence of the Dharma, so that like the swan, which legend has it, is able to drink from a mix of milk and water and extract just the nourishing milk, leaving behind the water. These quintessence of the teachings is able to condense a vast amount of words into a very concise statement that presents the teachings in their very essence, so that we can drink them up like the swan drinking milk from the mixture. This is how it is that we are able to fulfill our wishes to engage the Dharma under these circumstances.
Hola, da di dile da bu chi shi le tangbo de nang de che su do a se di shebe kabre. Tene lo che su do a se di tene kibu chungu bi lama kibu chungu dang tumo e lam kangrung ji tingo re. Tene di tenda di tene go de bo she na da se di la lo do ba kibu chungu lam de da su du na de chima de nyer gi lo ke ba dang chimar de we thap de ba ni na la do re. Chima de nyer gi lo ke eni chima la de we thap de ba thap la be zel je ba thap du ba ti ni na la de kibu chungu am chungu da tumo e lam ti do re.
Of these four dharmas of Gampopa, we are working with the explanation of the first of the four lines, namely that mind turns to Dharma. And this reflects the explanation of what is called the path of the being of initial spiritual maturity, or you could equally say the path shared in common with beings of initial spiritual maturity. And to lay that out in an easily understood way, what that means is basically two steps. The rousing of the mindset that seeks to gain future well-being, and the efforts to accomplish that through appropriate means. These two together is what is known as the path of the beings of initial spiritual maturity, or you could say the path shared in common with the initial degree of spiritual maturity.
Hola. Tiene de chima de nyer gi lo ke ba dang chimar de we thap la be zel je ba ni di junde ro. Tiene chima de nyer gi lo ke na de la tene chima ke wa chima de we thap tu ba la be zel de yung ro. Tiene da ni junde re ni. Tiene de dangbo chima de nyer gi lo ke go re. Chima de nyer gi lo ke na de chima de nyer ne ke wa chima tendo ke ko hong thong go do sa ba. Tendo ko hong thong ba la ton de ro. Ti de nyer ke na de tendo ko hong thong gi gyu kar re do de la che ba shu ani gyu de la de nyer ke ro. De nyer da to ke ro. De la de ne de tu la pe so yung ro.
When you look at these two, the mindset that seeks to gain future favorable rebirth and the efforts to accomplish the methods that lead to that favorable rebirth in future lives, the two are related as cause and effect. So it is based on the first, the mindset that seeks future rebirth, which serves as a cause, that the initial degree of spiritual maturity practitioner engages in efforts to accomplish those favorable rebirths in future lives. The two then are related as cause and effect, cause and result. This means that first it's necessary to give rise to the cause, this mindset that seeks a favorable future rebirth. From that mindset that has this urgency towards accomplishing that future rebirth, it naturally follows that there is a sense of enthusiasm and urgency towards the methods for gaining future positive rebirths in later lives. That yields the result, which is actually taking the efforts, doing what it takes to accomplish those future rebirths by practicing the causes that give rise to them.
Di chima dinir lo kiala dini gig digar sedila shimbadra kalgendi din sedila shimban yena di goka ne chima dinir lo gig mara din dini chima dinir lo kiala dambu di gig sedila shimbadi pango gre de pangye tab di garelamna dini chiwa mitaba bombadre.
This means that at first it's extremely important to give rise to this mindset that seeks favorable rebirths in future lives. It's important for this mindset to be very powerful, this sense of I must attain positive rebirths in future lives is the cause, and having a very powerful mindset in that way is the first step. So what's in the way of that? What becomes an obstacle or hindrance to that mindset? It's a reification, a fixation or obsession with this life. So when the mindset is one that sees only this life as real and nothing more, that is an unfavorable condition. It gets in the way or closes the door to developing the mindset that urgently seeks favorable rebirth in future lives. So in order for that mindset to develop, it's necessary to eliminate the hindrance of fixating on this life alone as real. How do we eliminate that? What is the method for eradicating that hindrance? The method is the contemplation of impermanence as it relates to death.
Hola. Ini da chiwa mitaba samje gopsu ani chiwa mitaba sambadala da chedir ringdu mineba chiwa dang chedir ringdu mineba dang chima penchidu dogo bas ni samgogura
Ganda Kamala Nipa Gomason.
chiwa mitaba samje gopsu dini chiwa mitaba sanada shini gunche ro maro shiwadi shiwadi dini chedigi tare kyawa jemagi goro dini gosu dini chiwa mitaba sedi gosu ani sedila ringdu mineba chiwa sambadang dini shini guncheba mayimba chima penchedu dogweba ni samlo dongora dini masangna chiwa mitaba gomsul sangmara chiwa mitaba gomsul ani nela pigba 용금하래.
When we speak of contemplating the impermanence as it relates to death, or simply put, our mortality, what is necessary? First, there needs to be a recognition of the indefinite nature of the length of our life. We don't know how long our life will last. Then also it's necessary to contemplate that once this life ends, once we die in this life, there is necessarily future lives that continue after this life ends. These 2 points are necessary for the contemplation of impermanence as it relates to mortality, both the indefinite length of our own life, the uncertainty of when it will end, as well as the necessity of continuing forward to future lives when it does end. If these 2 contemplations, if these 2 understandings are not complete, then there's no way to really hit the crux of the methods for contemplating impermanence as it relates to death.
Digi dini tsidila shembe nyingbo yang rogu mare. Pero shana. Dini mi mangchawa ki gari samburi lana. Dini imajik shigire mashi nguyen la dini kibu yoba sangma tangu gures. Da chamcham rogu gore. Ini khala yabu saga gore. Gari jene lana imajik shigires. Mangchawa ki di samla tangu ara. Dini kundi chiwa mitagwa ima hagu goda. Chiwa ima hagu goda. Chiwa digi kundi tsidila shinsha pilgido. Tidre shimbe nimbo rogumida. Daga nasi dini yang kashi susai kamit jingin yara. Da disa yang gara sanggore chiwa mida wadi chiwa da hagu gore hine chiwa di yang kundu ini tidile chiwa digi yang chima denir lo kegimida. Chiwa di kundu da ini misi kangal di juk duye gidine tabra samla tamado chiwa di kewa chime dine chiwa dilatene kewa chime dunir kigimida dinda chiwa mitaba imba chiwa tamgi ini tsedila shimba toba dang chime dunir gi lo kewa nidi yongumida dinda dine chiwa mitaba samyadi tsedila ringdu mineba chiwa dan chima penchedu dogwe bas sulnidi sungdu delgo reso.
Why is that? Why is it that both of these need to be complete for a contemplation of impermanence with respect to mortality? Well, look at what happens if these 2 points, both a recognition that our life will end at some uncertain point and that there is necessarily future lives to follow. Let's look at what happens if those 2 are not complete. If one is only thoroughly understanding the fact that one will die, that one is mortal, but does not have this mindset that is directed to future lives, then what happens is that this mindset that seeks to accomplish favorable circumstances in future lives has no basis for arising. And if we look around today, most people have this mindset. There's this sense of, I know I will die, so until then, I'm going to get the most out of life. I'm going to enjoy myself. I'm going to have great food. I'm going to travel. I'm going to get the most I can out of my time. And this is commonly the way many people think. There is an understanding of mortality, the fact that our life will certainly end at some uncertain point, but there is not an understanding of future lives to follow. What happens? Our fixation on this life becomes stronger. We take this life to be real, an even stronger way than before. So there's no remedy there. to this attachment, this fixation and reification of this life, when we think of only our mortality with no understanding of future rebirths. You can also look at the example of those who become so unhappy that they choose suicide. There is definitely an understanding of mortality there, of death, but there is not a mindset that seeks a future rebirth that has favorable circumstances. Death is seen in that circumstance as a means to quell, to ease the difficulties of their life. And there is not a mindset that seeks future favorable rebirth. So what happens is that mindset doesn't develop. There is no method to overturn the fixation on this life that takes this life alone as real. And this shows us the importance of why these 2 points need to be in place. For a contemplation of impermanence as it relates to death to be effective requires both an understanding that we are mortal, we will die at some uncertain point, and second, that once that time comes, we will necessarily proceed into future rebirths. With these together, we are able to actually contemplate impermanence with respect to mortality in a way that gives rise to a mindset that seeks positive future rebirths.
Hola. 어디니 다 치마 편치도 도그바 이 삼주 가서더니 껴와 치마 될라 텐도 등인도 니 도사디 텐도 등인도 니 숭예바레 다 레레신데 신나 도아르 도겨레 수드나 드네 텐도 겐도 니나라도 그래 텐도 겐도 니수 녜바레 다 텐도 겐도 니 가와 도그레 슬람지 레라라레 바이바 레긴데양 신고로 티에드니 치마 텐도 치마 도사 텐도 겐도 니수 녜바이바당 대양드네 레라라레 바이바 samlutayla dene legünde yang shekugura
Once we have this understanding that not only are we mortal, but we will necessarily continue on to future rebirths, then the next question becomes, well, what kind of future rebirth? There are 2 general possibilities, both favorable rebirths and unfavorable rebirths. That's a brief way of condensing the possibilities. You can also go one by one and describe 6 classes of beings in samsara. But those 6 classes simply boil down to positive and negative rebirths. So how is it that one takes birth in either favorable or unfavorable existences? This is independence on karma. So this is the issue of karmic cause and effect. It is based on karmic cause and effect that the rebirths in future lives are either positive or negative. That's the determining factor. When we have this understanding that our future rebirth depends on karmic causality, then we also have an understanding of karmic cause and effect.
hola da din because dine tango chiwa mitaba sambe gone ini sedila ringdu mineba di sedila ringdu minebe suldi samlo tango gore da di 최딜라 링도 미네바 치와 삼술 딜라더니 치와 삼발라 개바체나 치와 삼괴비 김젠당 치와 지달 삼비술 니기 보내 삼을 땅거라 그래서 당부 치와 삼바 치와 지달 삼비술 대신에 근데 치와 삼발라 또하면은 삼바던 공부 지금 알아 어디 이제 드니 삼바던 공부 유령부 제고 그러더라 세들 링도 미네바 치웨 술디라 삼바던 공부 유령부 맞으나 아니 냠뇽 숙침부 계기 말에 디마게나 세딜라 심비 님보 제투고 말에 그래서 세딜라 심바디 하장기드니 셈나라 박차 띵ring보라 띵사보라 드니 나란서 아니 치와 미다바 인술디 아니 퇴바던 선배 고아담 기스 아니 통면네 박차 심기 띵사보래 사셔베 박차디 숲투고 말아 나도 퇴바던 선배 고아치부 고아디 surface the intellectual raw the surface level right मतलब यो मारे 어디 있는 것은 심기 띵 서버를 예배 체들의 심배 방차 띵 서버디 님보 제투고 말해 어디 있는데니 체들의 심배 방차 띵 서버디 아니 띵네 옹에 님보 제발라 되네 퇴바다 선배 미다고 시베 고아디 몸겸네 심기 띵니 냠뇽 숙천부 지켜고 그러 디께나 되네 세들의 심배 박차되기 님보도 그러 세들의 심박이 님보도 그래 되네 인상 되네 당고 퇴바다 선바 맞이는 검겨요 말아 퇴바다 선바 제네 아니 고아들라 검겸네드니 용화 숙치보 제마마 임베 용화 끼고 그래 제마마 임베 용화 대양드니 더동양 검네 쫄와 매봐 용화 끼고 그래 어떻게 없어드니 세들레심에 방차되기 님부 제투그러
When we're considering this contemplation of impermanence as it regards our mortality, it is, of course, necessary to contemplate, to really reflect and think about this. But it's not just thinking about it. We also need to know the procedure that is effective to actually give rise to a meaningful understanding of the impact of our mortality, as I just described. So we need to know that it's necessary to contemplate impermanence as it relates to mortality. And also we need to know the process, how to do that in an effective way. Why is that? Well, if we just sit around thinking about our mortality, think about death without an effective method, we don't necessarily develop enthusiasm for generating a deep-going understanding. In other words, that contemplation does not activate the motivation to meditate, to develop a familiarity with that understanding of our mortality. What that means is that we don't actually develop a remedy to our attachment to this life. We have an understanding that our life is indefinite in length, and we can think about this a lot. We can really get it. but it doesn't actually act as a remedy that eases our fixation on this life. Why is that? Because this fixation, this reification as real, this taking this life to be real, has been going on for very long. It's very strong and very deep rooted. By contrast, if we have an understanding of our mortality and the impermanence of this life, solely from listening to the teachings and contemplating, thinking about the import, that understanding is simply not powerful enough to penetrate this very vast, very deep habitual tendency to seize on this life as real. Why is that? Because the understanding that comes from listening and contemplating alone, however strong, is still on an intellectual level. It's superficial. What we need is a remedy that goes as deep as our habitual tendency to take this life as real and develop a fixation to it. A simple, superficial, intellectual understanding from listening and contemplating is not deep enough to serve as an antidote, a remedy for our fixated attachment to this life. We need a remedy that goes as deep and is as powerful as the habit of taking this life alone as real. The understanding of impermanence based on listening and contemplating is a means for developing the wish to really integrate that understanding through meditation. It is meditation, which in Tibetan means to cultivate familiarity, that actually takes that understanding and makes it very powerful, very deep going. That is how we're actually able to generate an understanding with the strength and the depth to serve as a remedy for our vast and deep-rooted habitual tendency to take this life as real. So what happens is we need that listening and contemplating to develop that initial understanding. Without it, then we don't have any understanding at all. So we need that initial intellectual understanding, but then it's necessary to go even deeper, to broaden and deepen that understanding, to make it more integrated so that we have a unadulterated and unfabricated experience, an immediate experience that is incredibly powerful, potentially even unbearable, of what it means to have this kind of impermanence with respect to our mortality. This powerful, visceral experience of our mortality is what is capable of serving as a remedy for our deep-rooted, long-standing habitual tendency to take this life as real.
Hola. Tatsedir ringdu mineba chiwa sambadela dene chiwa sambadela dene nato dunsenyi yore dunsenyi di gare lana chiwa sambadang ringdu mineba chiwa sambadang chiwe namba gomba nisung yore ringdu mineba chiwa gomtsul di dene ngebardu chiwa samba namji chambeba samba 지경이 동버 치와 삼바 samsul sumyore. Tensen number sumgone, samatango gore.
So when we are considering the contemplation of our mortality, there is the contemplation of death itself and also the understanding of the characteristics of this mortality, what's involved when we're contemplating and meditating on our mortality, the impermanence as it relates to death. There are actually three features to this contemplation. There is first the certainty that we will die. Second, the fact that the time of death is uncertain. And third, the point that nothing can accompany us, or this is sometimes expressed as only Dharma can be of assistance. So I'm going to repeat those. First, that we are certain to die. Second, that the time of death is uncertain. And third, that only Dharma can be of help at the time of death, as nothing can accompany us.
Hola. Tanganzo teni nyebardu chiwa samba. Na nyebardu chiwa samba di nyebardu chiwa samba dela dini yang jumten namba sumgi bane samgu gore. Nanzo nyebardu chigire karchine lamna. Nar mashiwa liba meba. Thongma meba ne tandabadu dini korwa nala mashiwa hadaba chiya yomaro. Sangi jumdende yang kombat tawore. Dinashi dini kyalbo top chimbo, tajumba, tutop. Ta mongbo peyore, ini sangma kombat tawone chiya laya mare. Di inza dini, di gare gimten lamna chiwa di dokta mebi gimten re. Chiwa la gangi yang dokta gu mare. Di inza dini, ngaru mashiwa chigan liba meba yenzang, ngarang yang masih walaya yo maro kimjenjik dire kimjenjiba de garada na lui duje imbesir ngarang tu lui di ini gyugen leke bi duje re tin za di tini lui gi nibadla yang ini gyudila che yo sang gyule tu bi dubudla yang che yo ma do ini che thame ba ne niba thame ba yo mare tin za di gyugen leke bi duje indi namshik jigbi thajende tin za di ngebardu shikubar
When we Gonda, Sumba.
Kimje sumba de kare langa se di keji relation de zodo gore ine dela nembe yo mare tin da de shive kebar ni bar de shigu gore
Turning to the first of these, that we are certain to die, there are 3 points that make this up as well. When we contemplate the certainty of our death, we look at it through the perspective of, first, the fact that there is no one who has previously escaped death. If we look at the entire course of history of samsara, not a single being has escaped death. Even the Buddha, the transcendent conqueror, completed his intentions and passed into parinirvana. A large number of arhats, the foe destroyers, mahasiddhas, and so forth have been born, attained realization, and they too have all passed. Why is that? Because it is not possible to turn back death. There is no way to cheat death, to reverse it. There is not a single being that has been able to turn away death. This is the first reason why it is certain that we will die. The second reason is that our body is composite. It's made up of causes and conditions. As such, it is dependent on conditions. These causes yield a particular result, this body, and that body does not have a definite time span to continue existing. It exists conditioned on the continued existence of the causes and conditions for survival. But as with all composite phenomena, these will come to an end and the body will necessarily die. This is the second reason we are certain to die, that the body is composite. The third reason that we are certain to die is that life is consumed moment by moment. As each moment passes, the course of our lifespan is slowly disintegrating, dissolving, until there comes a time where there is no life left and we will necessarily die. This is the third reason why we are certain to die.
All the Neverthe Chiva, that Neverthe Chiva, the Nats Paget like Yeshe Yore, someone not to never the cigarette, some year. The drink answer never the Chiva on the Master Namsila Chamebare, Chiva and never in a Namsila never never. Kadishi never ever. Kadishi never never conducted Dilla and Kim Sum when some of them. Kadishi never never got the sick, around the Tambuling with Cecil and never yamare. Chipa Chunjunka Shiva Yore, Lo Matuka singing Yore, Lo Chuchunika singing Yore, Posa Dharmas singing Yore, Kengo Chane singing Yore. The end of the someone can go Chinese Shiva Kabamidwa. The end of Kadishi never yamare. Never may begin the chick selling, never may begin the Kimsin never the Lula Newbon begin the Louis Yamjung, Louis and saw the Hajang Yamjung. Kimsin somebody got a Chivikin Hajang Mambore. But the end, Namjing never various.
Turning to the second main point of why it is certain of the contemplation of death, it's not just that we are certain to die, the first point, but also that the time of death is not definite. This also is expressed in terms of 3 points. The 3 points are, first, that there is no particular lifespan in this world. We can look around and see that all of us are the same in being vulnerable to death. Death has no age. People die at 10 years old. People die when they're older, at 20, at 50, at 80. There is no fixed lifespan for beings. There is no certainty as to when anyone will die. There is no particular way to determine that. That's the first reason why the time of death is uncertain. The second reason is that our body has no substantial essence or core. There isn't something in the body that is a fixed essence that continues unabated. This is the second reason why it is indefinite when we will die. There are many causes for death, but very few causes relative to the causes for death that support our survival. This is the third reason why the time of death is not certain, that there are many possible causes of death relative to the number of conditions that sustain life.
Hola. Tiene kumbulu tu gisore. Chiwi kini shindu mang, sumbi kini musiji esore. Chiwi kini hajang mambore, sumbo deagi kini nyungmoda yomores. Ine deda tamji chiwi yang sore. Sumbo deagi kini nyungmoda yomore, diang chiwi kini girwa yores. Pena ngado kala sayadi. So sumbo deagi gyujigra. Ine ne mangchodi kala dine yungwara. Diang diko sudini. Sumbo deagi kini nyungmoda yomore dihine. Sumbo deagi kini nyung diang chiwi kini girwa yores. Dili tamna, dila samudana chiwi kini magirwa jiga yomore. Dila samudana chiwi yang. Dewe tawda chizu jiga. Dila samudana dini namchingi bambara yasore.
With respect to the many causes of death, the Master Nagarjuna has spoken about this, saying that relative to the conditions that sustain life, that support our survival, there are far more conditions that support death, that can lead to death. And what's more, not only are there many more conditions that are fatal than are supportive of life, but even some of the conditions that support life can become deadly. For example, food is a necessity for survival. To continue to live, we need to nourish ourselves by eating. Yet we can see easily that many illnesses their origin is in food. There's any number of illnesses that are caused by food, and some can be fatal. So not only are the conditions for life much fewer than the conditions that for death, but even the conditions that support life can become fatal conditions, resulting in death. But the reverse isn't true. There aren't conditions that are fatal that can somehow turn into conditions that support life. This is how the Master Nagarjuna explained this dilemma.
Hola, tiene cosa de nengaranto namchingi bambe suldi ani marmela peshane songare. Ngato marme chigena, marme digi 공부 디나는 너무 가져 여바디 가서 하마거나 말미디 유릉 보거든 얘기를 저한테는 가서 놈니 먹는 것도 하마거나 근데 유릉 보 대가서 얘기를 해서 가서 랍투고 말아 세 빠투고 말아 이러디 놈 먹는 하마거 그래서는 가서 교환하면 레딩 가서 하고 말아 가서 최디링 통디 아니 교환하면 레라라 그러 디엔디네 교환하면 레기 니바디 하마거나 세디 가나서 드니 유릉 보거든 얘기를 하고 말아디 말한스미티 로추요 로니슈요 로십 중업 주투즈 가세나 디 교환하면 레기 니바디 하고 걸어 디엔다 교환하면 레기 니바디 하마거나 세디 가서 교환링 세딩 통디 쇠바두고 말아 디엔자 드니 남친게 밤에 말해요 손에 그러나 공부는 놈 가져요 하마거나 말미 유릉 보거든 버그리 하고 말아 빼디러래서 당나시들이 말미디 하장 nemchungra 디 강라드니 말미기 초시니 룽 숙청보 교위에나 다 말미 거디시그리 디 차네 녀밤에 봐라 그래서 말미 코랑원에 nemchung래 ini cho shini lung gyabne den galgin lungi ni kor deore tini indi koso tini num mazo badu dewe khaba yomaro kasi num hagona yang num mangyung hagona yang tini num mazo badu maname mashiwe khaba mido kasa maname nyamchungre galgin lung yore galgin lung yone maname de yang ini thako yona tini galgin lungi masa majum base tini num mazo badu degre esne ten yongro di mare maname nyamchungre maname nyamchung yone lung tanemena tini yang num mazo badu maname bargre ten yongro di mare tini cho shine galgin lungi tini karasugro neba yore di ni ne samatana tini numgi manglungi che hagona yang maname yurungbu gazi negre dila tini yomare yasungta pe dina shin garansu che diyan dina shires seso ni nyamchungre galgin ni chi galgin na nangi galgin hajang mangore
A vivid example for understanding the uncertainty of the time of death is a butter lamp. So butter lamps are made of a metal bowl that holds butter or some other oil or fuel that actually allows the flame to be continually fed. But if we have a large butter lamp that we cannot see into the bowl, we don't know how much oil is in that bowl. It's impossible to know how long that butter lamp will continue to burn. Unless you know how much fuel, how much oil or butter is left in the bowl, there's no way to measure the length of time that the flame will continue to burn in the butter lamp. It's like that for our life. The measure of how long our life will be depends in part on the force of karma from our previous life. But we have no way of knowing what that force is. We have no way of knowing whether it will fuel a life 10 years long, or 20, or 30, or 40, or 50, or however many years long. The force of the karma from our previous life is a determining factor as to the length of this life, but we have no way of gauging the force of that. So we have no way of knowing how long this life is likely to last. It is similar to having a butter lamp that we cannot see into. So we don't know how much oil is left to fuel the flame. But it gets better, because not only is it uncertain how long that flame will last because of the quantity of the oil, but then there are also many conditions that will impact how much that flame will last. For example, if we have a butter lamp and it is exposed to very strong winds, the butter lamp's flame is quite vulnerable in exposure to strong winds. That wind is a very unfavorable condition for allowing that flame to continue to burn. So there's a very big difference as to whether the butter lamp will continue to flame depending on the exposure to the various conditions around it. The flame is quite vulnerable if conditions like wind that are unfavorable to it become quite powerful. Then even if the oil of the lamp is not yet complete, the wind can overcome the flame. Without the wind, the flame may continue to burn until the oil in the bowl has finished. But even with oil remaining in the butter lamp, strong winds, or other unfavorable conditions can overcome the power of the flame to continue burning. Our life is like this as well. We have no way of knowing the potential length of our life, and also we don't know all of the unfavorable conditions that we may meet to shorten even that lifespan. We are vulnerable to death and vulnerable to the very many unfavorable conditions that can shorten an unknown potential span of this life.
Hola, tienda de kumbulu ki shitting nala sore. Narang tu mitidi nyam chung chung kalgim mangbogi kalgim mangbodang kalgim mangbe any nebadan cheba. Penna kandere lana dine chi chubur lungsup ki kile yebe chi chubur dan chibare yasu. Lungsup dabu ki kile yebe chi chubur dan chibare yasu. Tiende chi chubur de hajang nyam chungre lungsup ne dine kalgen dabore. Any kalgen dabu ki kile yebe chi chubur di kadi jik nyeba yamara kejik yang nyeba yamara. Pe di dan chibare yasu na kanzi mitedi any nyam chung insul dang kalgen mangsul la samla tana. Teni kejik yang misi wenge pa mewa. Terin gongda yang shigre mare tenden yo mare suna. Namching yang pa mewa re suna.
The Master Nagarjuna, in his letter to a friend, also addresses this dilemma of our great vulnerability to death, our fragility of life, and the many contrary conditions that counter that life. And when we consider the incredible power of the many unfavorable conditions for continuing our life, he uses the example of a water bubble. A water bubble in a very strong current doesn't have much chance to sustain. The water bubble is very fragile. It's very vulnerable. And if it is exposed to very strong currents or waves or anything that serves as a unfavorable condition to sustain its fragile existence, it can't survive for even a split second. This is an example of our vulnerability to death, the fragility of our life, and the great many numbers and force of unfavorable conditions for our survival. When we really penetrate to what this means, we recognize that there's absolutely no certainty as to when we will die. There's not even any way to tell whether we will die tonight. This is what it means to really penetrate to the understanding that there is no way to know the time of our death. The time of death is uncertain.
Hola, tiende ne lubiludu ki sonare. Galgin mangsul dang ene lui dang so nyam chung insul ni cho ni ne samla tana. Tene lungsup ki kile yebe chi chibur nangshi namjing nyeba meba. Re tene indi kaso tene nganso ni kugne ya langaya ki duse ragre kokab ragre mare te samyang nyeba ya mare samre. Tagan nasin tene nganso uk chirol la tangiro uk chil la tangne nang la ngubya ki tene duse kokab ragre mare diyang te samyang nyeba mere samre. uk nang du ngubne chirol la yungaya ragre mare kokab ragre mare diyang te samyang nyeba ya mare samre. Namjing nyeme sede. Te samlayang chiwa dama chiwe nyeba ya mare samre.
The Master Nagarjuna continues with this explanation, saying that when we really penetrate to this contemplation from the perspective of both the fragility of our body, of our life force, its vulnerability to death on the one hand, and the very many conditions that are contradictory to our survival that can actually be fatal. These two perspectives really give us a deep going understanding of how it is that we are as fragile as a water bubble in turbulent currents. In fact, there is absolutely no way to know for certain when we go to sleep whether we will have the opportunity to wake or not from that sleep. There's no way to know. Not only that, not just going to sleep at night, we don't know if we're going to wake up, but even when we exhale with our breath, there's no way to be certain that we will have the opportunity to inhale again. We exhale and inhale all the time, but there is no certainty anytime that we exhale that we will be able to inhale once more. Not even that much is certain. This is what it means to really understand that the time of death is uncertain.
Hola, tirovedni namchi ngimi gitsul deladni ngishekena. Tringaran to uk chilla yungne nangla ngube gyo koga rawade pe ngosarchi botru gres. Ngosarchi bores. Nazo gongda ma ni khune shoge ya langae gi koga rawade yam pe mes ngosarchi boimba tru gres. Ngosarchi borawa mone ine ngazo tru maradi. Tangjingi wangdo done. Namchi ngami gitsul komburugi songanashin 이제게나 되니 나도 용네 낭낭 무베게 그거라 relaya 나서 아니 appreciate 용그래 공다 마년에 쇼게 야 랑드가서 드링 마신에 야 랑야 그거라 또 깨워 상벌에 삼네 relaya appreciate 용그래 이 appreciate 연나 가리 용그래 잡는데 메시지드네 pe 메시 니에 가보 된침벌에 디인자드니 디 디스디 촐라당금에선 양기로 국업디로 라그래 말에 태섬라디야 단다라와디 베가와 상보라 양기로 깨지 니바다 양상인 디라고 라그래 말에 양 태섬라 디 섬로당디 드니 디 버드 미세디 그러지 그래 촐라당금 말에 담배 취두벨라 베졌당그러 미다바 댕고에 디라라 이마르레당 깨지그레양 드니 자침보다 니가에 뭐 그래 이 트로와디요나 드니 미시 깨지그레당 니마르레 당 깨지그레양 니마르레기 깨지그레양 담배 취두발라드니 베제당그마도 디버드베당 롱마딩이 왕당 말해서
When we have a very strong sense of certainty about the uncertainty of the time of our death, when we have a clear knowing that penetrates to the very essence of that, simply exhaling and then inhaling again is a thing of wonder. How marvelous that I have the opportunity to inhale having exhaled. How marvelous this morning I'm awake after going to sleep last night. We have this great hope to wake in the morning. And when we find that we wake with the certainty of how indefinite our life is, we have a powerful feeling of wonder and marvel that we are awake. This is the clear knowing of the uncertainty of our time of death, as explained by the Master Nagarjuna. When we have that quality of clear knowing, when we penetrate to how uncertain our time of death is, we appreciate every inhalation that follows an exhalation. We are grateful every time we wake up in the morning after going to sleep. We appreciate every single moment, saying how fortunate I am to wake up, to inhale, and so forth. This appreciation gives us a deep going understanding of how valuable our life is, how we don't have a moment to waste, how incredibly fortunate it is we have this moment and any moment, the next and the one after, and so forth. It's not just this moment that is fortunate, that we have the opportunity to continue. There's no telling when this will end. So there is this sense of urgency that there is no time to waste, that our life should be brought to optimal advantage by making all the efforts possible to practice the genuine Dharma. This is what recollection of impermanence in the form of mortality does. It fuels an appreciation of the value of our life every day, every moment. We have an incredible joy and rejoicing that our life is continuing. This feeling is incredibly important. This sense of our great fortune fuels our appreciation for our life every single moment of every single day. And it fuels our urgency to make every effort to practice and accomplish the genuine Dharma without letting a single moment go to waste.
Hola. Ini dengan tu nyebar di siwa dan namci ngemi sampai digi, dan nyebar di siwa di samrutang di kasu dini, nyebar di siwa sampai debu di kare gugu deh lana, cuy nyebar di dub gugu du sampai dini, samrut kia gugu deh, ini dubar jigi sampai tamjak kia gugu deh, dub gugu du sampai dumba kia, karena nyebar di siwa deh, sidi cuy mata pengen mare. 인자 최 두고도 상 니바디 두버지기 상 남친님의 섬지가서 최대한 다단에 두고도 상 상린 능리당 다와제마다 로제마기 치셜도 마샤와세 그래서 남친님이라 딘디 상린 최치고 삼 치와디 드린 공달렘나 성린은 깨워제만이 숭예를 내그래 하고 말아. 다와제마단 깨워제만이 숭예를 내그래 하고 말아. 딘나시 로제마단 깨워제만이 숭예를 내그래 하고 메도. 딘자드니 최디 성린당 다와제마단 로제마기 치술도 마샤와 다단에 두고도 섬성로 깨고 그래서. 디케치도 남징님의 섬로당 그래.
So this explains the first 2 points of the contemplation of the impermanence with respect to our own mortality. First, that we are certain to die. And second, that the time of our death is uncertain. And each of these two serves an important purpose. First, the contemplation that we are certain to die. When we have really penetrated to what that means, the result is that we naturally have this urgent wish to accomplish the Dharma. It's what will actually benefit us beyond death. Then second, not only do we have this urgency, this wish to accomplish the Dharma, but we have this commitment to ourselves, this mindset that says, I must do it, I will do it. So these two, the urgency that seeks out how to practice and accomplish the Dharma, And second, the commitment to ourselves that naturally says, I must do it, arise from really penetrating the contemplation of the fact that we are certain to die. Then the fact that the time of our death is uncertain also serves a purpose. Not only do we have the urgency to accomplish the Dharma and the commitment, I will do it, I must do it, from the understanding that we are certain to die, but the time of death being uncertain resolves us to accomplish the Dharma right now, here and now, not tomorrow, not the next day or next week or next month or next year. Why? Because we are clear that the time of our death is uncertain. There's no telling of whether, if we put off accomplishing the Dharma, that time that we hope will come to do that will ever arrive. Indeed, it's impossible to know which will come first, tomorrow or our next life. We can't put off until tomorrow of what might never come, similar to next month or next year. We don't know if our next life will arrive before next month or next year. This thoroughgoing understanding that comes from the contemplation of the uncertainty of the time of death is what brings the mindset that says, I must accomplish the Dharma here and now in a powerful way.
다 숨바디 드니 지경미 동버치와 삼바세드레 시디 가서 류기 핑기 말에 롱적이 핑기 말에 년생기 핑기 말에 핑기 말에서는 류 롱주 년생기 나 마시와양 써야요 말아 드니 시디 가서 양념도 개야요 말아 시니 겨와지마 로디 가서 겨와지마 류 캡네로 써야 말에 년생티니로 써야 말에 이미 롱적 캡네로 써야 말에 갑급하지 않게 두고 말에 디인데드니 삼불링이 너를 상마기 따고 nga랑이나요 시디 가서 갑급하지 않게 두고 말에 삼불링이 미 상마 nga랑이 년생이나요 미치기 않게 두고 말에 타나양 nga랑이 류디야드니 로제네 육네 도거마도 리디안 케투고 말해 디인디 저 니가는 편바여 말다 마시와 양 제도고 말해 시디거스 냠도 결사야요 말해 디인자 이 리롱주 관계 양 미편버치와 미동버치와 이 선로단 거래요.
And the third point that at the time of death, nothing can be of help, nothing can accompany us, also relates to three things. It relates to the wealth and possessions we have in this life, to the friends and family, relatives and dear ones of this life, and our own body. None of these three, our possessions and wealth, our dear ones, or our body, can be of any help to us with respect to death. While we are still alive, there's no way that any of these three can prevent our death. There's no way that our body, our friends and family, or however much wealth and possessions we've amassed in life can turn away death. And then when the time of our death comes, we can't take any of these with us. They cannot accompany us and help us along the way. However much we've managed to accumulate in this life, even if we manage to accumulate all the wealth of the world, you can't take it with you. There's nothing that all that wealth can do at the time of our death, nor can our family or friends accompany us, nor can our own body. In the end, even our own body becomes a corpse. We can't carry even our body forward with us. None of this is of help with respect to our death in both perspectives. During life, none of these three can help us to prevent death. And at the time of death, we can't take any of these with us. They cannot actually accompany us at death.
Hola. 다 지금이 동벌 치외 출디 삼로당네 드네 줌데디 그랬고 그래람나 드니 최디 개세 같은바 100% 최두부도 삼로당 그래서 탁치게 그래 셈이 타쳐고 그래 두구도 두버지기 된 그림신 느끼기라 당도 두구도 그래서 시외 가서 강의에 평균에도 되는다 니 대체 같은 거 취해도 그거도 이 제라드네 두버지기 거버능시 네 두버지기 좀 탁쳐 담적 교육을 해서 이 지금의 동거 치와 선배 거버래
What is the purpose that this third point serves? The understanding that nothing else is of help at the time of death. This serves to completely and conclusively determine that we must accomplish the Dharma, putting in 100% effort towards the practice and accomplishment of Dharma. So that you can see that there's a sequence that's going on here. There's the understanding, I must accomplish Dharma. There's the commitment, I will do it. There's the sense of doing it here and now. And then also this conclusive determination, I will devote my energies 100% to accomplishing the Dharma, because there is nothing else that will help at the time of death. So this is the purpose of this third point, that none of the things that we value in life can benefit us with respect to our time of death. And it serves the purpose to be very definite in our determination to accomplish the Dharma 100%.
Hola. Tiene da gese gatamba chedu budu sedi. Samyadi kare lamna. Che gese gatamba du tugu mara. Che gese gatamba dumna dine che yese thongwa du kara du tugu mara di. Gese gatamba chedu budu sana ngarangi lui nga yisumyara. Ngarangi lui nga yisumdi. Dine nindang senigala. Nimarela nin seniyara. Dine ngarangi lui nga yisumdi nindang senigala dine chejena gese gatamba chera. 최대 계획하다가 두고 말해 나랑기 류가 예숨당 뒤세디 계획하다가 쳐다 땅나 계획하다가 쳐두라 최 거르주네 캠로진에 되게 거르진에 되게 간다 아니 나랑기 최대기 되는 류 롱제 년천다 제가 탐제라 심바 돈에 되는 계획하다가 최마도 템바 미두 선배듯이 계획가서 이 선바다 맞을나? 되는 거리진에 쳐요. 자통내 쳐요. 칼라산에 쳐요. 그래서 남긴 가서 칼라사디 칼라라 심보레 삼내 사기로. 다 심보레 삼배 신차리 깨기 말아. 칼라산에 양 거리진에 라나 쳐두베치도 사기로. 디지데 그서 칼라사와야 쳐두 그래. 쫄럼 탐제 쳐서도 그러. 디인베드니 쫄럼 거리진에 고숨기 쫄럼 거리진에 상황 쳐려도 그러. 그래서 로 쳐려더라. 류롱제 년생 상마라 심바도네. 아니 심바도 디지디 거스니 롱제 라 롱제나요. 신차기 왕기 롱저그 말아. 최두배 등견도 롱저그라. 드리지리 디지리 거서더니 고숨디 이제 니가라 담비 치스도그라. 저럼 제세 상황도 치스도그라. 미다고 디제다 말았나? 드는 게지게다 맞춰.
This mindset that says, I must accomplish the Dharma 100% is very important. We could do something less than 100% otherwise. So what does this mean? It means that we accomplish Dharma, we practice and accomplish the Dharma with everything we do, with our body, speech, and mind, which are called the three doors or three gates, all our physical actions, all our verbal speech, all our mental thoughts, and so forth, day and night are dedicated 100% to engaging the Dharma. Every day is composed of day and night. Our activities are enacted through the three doors, our body, speech, and mind. And to say that we accomplish the Dharma 100% means that day and night, through all three of these doors, our body, speech, and mind, everything we do is Dharma. So it could be a refuge, going for refuge, or a Dharma practice, but it could be anything else as well. If we have this reification of the things of this life, our body, our possessions, even our dear ones, then everything we do is directed towards that fixated attachment. But in this mindset, everything we do is Dharma. Even when we eat, of course we have to eat, but with this mindset, I will accomplish Dharma with every action of body, speech, and mind, day and night. Even when we have delicious food, that sense of how delicious it is not something that feeds our fixation to this life. It is something that nourishes our Dharma practice. Whatever we do, all of the various activities of everyday life, all of them become Dharma, irrespective of which of the three gates, body, speech, or mind, are active. All our activities are Dharma. Why? Because the mind has turned to Dharma. We have reversed our reification of the things of this life, even our body, our wealth and possessions, our dear ones. We are operating not under the power of that fixated attachment, that reification that takes only the things of this life as real, but we are operating under the mindset that is motivated by accomplishing Dharma. So all our everyday regular activities of all the three gates, body, speech, and mind, day and night, are actually accomplishing the Dharma. This is what it means when we are able to penetrate to a complete understanding of impermanence with respect to our mortality and never be separated from that. That is what fuels our activity being 100% Dharma all the time.
rangi semdi tul sem garigi tul garela na lodo namshi rangi sem tul na kabdela ngazo mita bara wa de lodo namshi gi rangi semdi tul so da kabdela ngazo mita bara dene sedile shembadi tul gara dene sem tul rangi semde tul. Lodro namshi, da karegi tul gore, Lodro namshi gi rangi semde tul. Kapdala nga Lodro namshi nani, mitabaga, sedile shembade tul gore. Ani Lodro namshi rangi sem tul na asore. Tagum kaso Lodro namshi rangi sem tul na. Tagum deju kezo menayang. Tawadang, gomba sama, tawa samon, ani chage chimbo gomba samon narucheru. Tene kerim soglin. Tene ani nyamne gaya menayang sonreda. Tagum deju kezo menayang. Tarbe lamle shendu chubame. Kirangi cholam garejiba thangma tarbe lamre eso. Lodo namshigi ani tsedila shimba, krowala shimba di tulna. Tanda tsedila shimba dan krowala shimba lona, shimba ngongirwa mena. Tene kirang ja tungnayang, jagi rola chane tungumara. Garajane lamna chö dhulegi tene ludendi sogo gore, di chido tungi samdi kasu, ja tungaliya chö. Tene si ni kungnayang, ni ki rodala chane. Ni ki kibodala chane kugumara. 그래서 니 마구나 나 수고 쳐두고 말해. 수고 맞춰나 최 두고 말해. 니인자 최 두벨 수고 쳐 그래. 수고 쳐야 니 구고 그래. 어디인자더니 니 구기 섬들고서 니 구고 대한 쉐라. 어디 지데 가서 아니 따금 대지 깨져라서 받더니 냠년 삼모 매나양 계란 게 쩌럼 상화디 최도 그래. 성가. 타르비 람레 신도 초범에 성 그 뒤로 단단한 나서다 미다가 찍으러 니들이 미다바디 뭔지 gör네 세들의 신바디 둘나 드니 키랑기 쫄람 그래지 바 상마디 기부 중에 치서 도그러 쫄람 그래지 바 상마 깨와치만 먼저 고방 토백이 치도 지기러 드니 아니 고숨가디 남 닌진이가라 드니 기부 중에 치서도 그래 디 제지게다 뭐 쳐라다 제지게다 뭐 쳐두면 선들
The master Zapachul Rinpoche also has something to say about this. He says, tame the mind, tame the mind. He says it twice because it's important. Then he says, tame your own mind. What does it mean here to say tame your own mind? He says taming a mind refers to the 4 thoughts that reorient the mind, that turn the mind to the Dharma. Of these 4, we're in the context here of discussing impermanence with respect to mortality, which is the basis for reversing our taking the things of this life as real. Another way of understanding that phrase of fixated attachment or reification of things of this life is that in and of themselves, that is where our attachment lies to the things of this life for their own sake and nothing more. Zapachul Rinpoche says, tame the mind, tame the mind, tame your own mind with these 4 thoughts that turn the mind, reorienting them to Dharma. This is the way that we are able to tame our reification of the things of this life, taking them to be ends in and of themselves. When we have this mindset, then absolutely everything we do is Dharma. Not to mention, of course, contemplation of the correct view, meditation, Mahamudra, the 6 yogas of Naropa, the practices of creation and completion in the Mantrayana. there is no other practice than this. When we really think about it, it's about turning the mind to Dharma that reverses our fixation with the things of this life, taking them to be ends in and of themselves. So not only the obvious things like meditating on the view, Mahamudra, tantric practice, etc., but absolutely everything we do in our everyday life becomes the practice of Dharma. We are engaging in the path to liberation by reversing our attachment to this life, taking the things of this life to be ends in and of themselves, reversing our reification of samsara, taking samsaric existence as an end in and of itself. If we have managed to reverse that reification, that idea of the things of this life and as samsara, as ends in of themselves, then absolutely everything we do becomes Dharma. Even if we sit there and enjoy the taste of some tea that we're drinking, that's also Dharma. It's supporting our life. It's nourishing our body, which is how we are able to accomplish the Dharma. When we sleep, we don't sleep simply for the sake of sleeping, for the sake of comfort, but because sleep is necessary to replenish our body. And our body is how we accomplish the Dharma. So then sleep becomes Dharma. Drinking tea becomes Dharma. Every single thing we do, when it is done with a mindset suffused with the recollection of impermanence of our own mortality, becomes Dharma. There's no need to mention, of course, more obvious Dharma practices, Mahamudra, Tantra, and so forth. Those too are genuine Dharma. This is what happens when we have a thoroughgoing, complete understanding of impermanence in the form of our mortality. It is what allows us to tame taking the things of this life as ends in themselves, reifying this life, so that all the things that we enjoy in this life become the everyday practice of Dharma. Our everyday activities are now the path shared in common with the initial degree of spiritual maturity. They are the path that leads to the favorable rebirths in future lives. This means that all day and all night, through the three gates of body, speech, and mind, our activities have all turned to the Dharma of the initial degree of spiritual maturity. This is accomplishing Dharma 100%. This is what it means to say, I shall accomplish Dharma 100% of the time in every way.
Ola, digidine chiwa gomtul sumdi shebare nibar chiwa namji chameba chigyam dongbar chiwa.
This is the explanation of how to contemplate impermanence in the form of our mortality through the three main points that we are certain to die, the time of death is uncertain, and that only Dharma is of benefit with respect to our death.
Ola, dedo chiwa mitaba di any sedile simbi nimbur duela dine o nimbur duala da dine mitaba dushi dine shukdabo kewar jibala di tingdu dine chiwi namba di salbo gomgo gure tanda di shigre lama di shidi garis shigre di chiwi namba di sheya mara di gangla dine shidi gaso garis yungre di chiwi namba di 치위 출람 치위 넘버 되더니 세고 겁나 되니 될라 세 될라 되니 이 교회 암 교시 숙침복계라 교시 숙침복계는 세들의 신비 님보 톱 치르도록 어디인데니 치와디 되네 이 치와라 교시기로 암 이중에 세들의 이중에로 톱 침보등 숙침복 세들의 신비 님보 제투킨 드레께와라 드니 치외 넘버디 살고 공부 그래서 인상 치와 공부당 치외 넘버 공부하시네 이시라
This thorough understanding of impermanence with respect to our own mortality is what serves as an effective remedy to overturn reifying the things of this life, taking them as ends in themselves. When we have this understanding of our mortality in an extremely powerful way, it gives clarity with respect to the fact that we will die and what it means, what the facets of our dying mean. We see very clearly how it is that we will die and all of the ramifications that come from that death being uncertain, etc. This gives rise to what's known as disillusionment. Our mind becomes disillusioned with the things of this life. You could say that our mind becomes heartbroken at the situation of taking things to be real in this life. And naturally, that fixated attachment, that reification is overturned. This mindset of disillusionment is what overturns our taking things of this life to be real in and of themselves. This incredible, strong disillusionment is what is able to serve as a remedy for this fixated attachment that takes things of this life to be real, to be of value for their own sake and nothing more. So in this way, we can see how it's important to understand both the fact of our mortality and also the aspects, the ramifications related to the uncertainty and the need for Dharma to be of assistance.
나 치외 넘버 검수디 먼저 다고 들긴 나라 치외 진입 검수는 송로 치외 진입 검사디 아니 다고 들긴 나라 아니 소디 세도 그래 욱체도 그래 남시 겨치 말도 그래스 치외 진입디 송로 세도 그래 속체도 그래 아니 남시 치마 아니 겨치 말 포도 그래스 디인디거스더니 다 도르디지네 딜레다 테스 세버지나 딜링어서 치외 넘버 검세다 치외 넘버 나서로 치외 넘버랑 예바메버라더니 액시덴트 차네 시에요레 나네 시에요레 경고 차네 시에요레 라소바 디인디니 치와양 가니스 시그레 넘버 예바메버라 이내다 가서 지단들이 나네 시외 온드제나 시외 온드제네들이 디 넘버 겁나 당가서 네 나네 아니 민주지 다에게 러지기로 민주까지 제네한테네 다에 매바 네디 두루 도구나 다가 팔절 서서 말에 시설에 섬는데 나랑기 섬다 취득 없어. 되네 샘 교랑랑 용으로. 디급스들이 나랑서 섬로 걸 디급스 나랑서 내당 근데 요래 슬람나. 되네 먼저 체딜라 유릉보 베줄전에 사셔베 너르상마 하도 거래. 유릉보 냠도드네 제동진에 대대베드네 년전 상마당 달도 거래. 디급스 애니 단다바도드네 셈기들이 신차 제약이 율 노르롱치 상마당 달고에 달제 메바 달고에 디 하장가락하고 그러. 다가는 신들이 유릉보 제동진에 냠도 도셔베 년신대당 달도 여말에 달고구거래. 이 동을 쳐보라. 지릭제. 다 신애들이 치만 편지도 로고거래. 아니 치만 편지도 로디 가서 아니 네베 디바디 단다더니 세들의 유고역이 년전당 노르롱지기 치도 사샤베 디바디 쿨리도고 그래. 아니 개와 치마라 편약이 대와 개와디 대외규 개와디 두비어 말해. 대인자더니 개와 두규 마중아 개바. 아니 개와 치마 네베 디바 세대기 류롱주기 치도 류롱주 년생기 치도 사고 디바디 쿨리도고 그래. 류롱주 년생 상마 샤네 도고 그래. 어떻게 인도 가서 뒤인도 가서 드니 뒤가서 다 겨봐 숙치 뭐여라 치마를 편배 겨봐 룹주마 중앙 겨봐 치마를 내배 드니 뒤바디 냠도 그르고에 뒤고 왕도 전에 드니 겨봐 치마 가도 겨봐 매봐 인송이 내서 저거에 어디서 상마 섬으로 당대 가서 드니 눈을 좀 보여.
We can look even more specifically at how to contemplate the various aspects or ways that relate to our death. In the Ornament of Precious Liberation, Gampopa defines death. He gives a definition for death. And that definition includes these 3 points: the extinction of the life force, the cessation of the breath, and the transference or propelling of the consciousness into a future existence. So I'll repeat those in case you didn't get them. The extinction of the life force, the cessation of the breath, and the propelling of the consciousness into a future existence. So this is the definition that Gampopa gives in the Ornament of Precious Liberation for death. And the ways of death, the aspects or the ways that death can manifest, of course, are very many. There's no definite number. We can die due to accident or illness or any number of other unfavorable conditions. There's no telling the form of our specific death. But among all of those forms, the way that we contemplate the shape that our death will take has to do not so much with the specificity. For example, we may die of an illness, and when we know we have an illness, we can have treatment and do what we can to address that illness. That's a good way to extend our life and our well-being. But nevertheless, at some point, we can recognize that however much we are able to use our resources to gain treatment for illness, it's not going to extend our life indefinitely. This can give rise to a deep-seated sorrow that there is nothing we can do to prolong our life. But the important thing with the contemplation of the form of our death is that no matter what the situation might be, no matter the specifics of the causes of our passing, in this life, all of the things that we cherish, our wealth and possessions, our family and friends, our own body, all of these are things we will have to leave behind. We cannot take our things with us, all of our possessions. We will necessarily be parted from our family and friends and even our own body. But when we have very strong fixation and attachment to these things, these objects that bring up a powerful attachment in our mind, it's extremely hard to be faced with that moment of inevitable separation, of complete separation from our dear ones, our belongings, and so forth. So all of these things, to the extent we have a strong attachment to them, our suffering at the time of being separated from them becomes even greater. By taking things to be real in and of themselves, when the time comes to leave behind our possessions, our dear ones, our own body, our suffering is quite great. This strengthens our suffering. And not only that, but when we take those things to be real in and of themselves, throughout our life, we may even have undergone wrongdoing for the sake of amassing wealth and possessions, caring for our loved ones and protecting them, maintaining our bodies and so forth. And then at the time of death, not only do we face the suffering of being parted from all of these, but we labor under the karmic effect of any wrongdoing that we have engaged for the sake of these things, taking them to be real in and of themselves. So this too gives an incredible sense of sorrow, of great sadness, recognizing that all we have done has not allowed us to continue with the things that we care for, that any wrongdoing we have engaged on for their sake will continue into future lives and so forth. This great sorrow that arises is what is being described here as the form that death takes. No matter what the causes of death might be, there is great sorrow in the parting from the things to which we have great attachment. There is immense sorrow in understanding that any wrongdoing we have engaged in for their sake is going to propel us to negative rebirths rather than serving as a cause for favorable rebirth. This compounds our suffering from separating from them even more to incredibly powerful heights.
All torna dine nga to geze shiwalagi junjun nala sungbanasi dewa dekyang timuk be rangi dewa dadra chum tungal dorde semyokyang tungal ni la ngombar kyu sungro tundadi shinde sana samlo dang langlin chijilo togyo re sungre samlo la gare yor sana dewa dubgo samgyo re langlin la gare chigyo re sana rangi dewa de ta chomba na shi chomgyo re sungre samlo la gare yor la tungal pango samgyo re ine langlin la gare chigyo la tungal besul chene dubgyo re tindi ine samlo dang langlin ni cross togdo sungre ine pe de chibare nga che de la shen ne ine shidi gopsu dine che de la bedul chene duba de sangwa yok di che de sagwe digba de kur chima penchel nebe digba de kur di inde dine che de la cha sha be nor long je nin chen di kewa chima ge da dang la 다 차라. 개와치만다 욱체니 치마 번절 루디고서 냐와 드여기 규디 디바라. 디바디 가르치도 사르나 닌 루이 롱적이 치도 사라. 이 정말 샤네 도거라. 디치도 사고 디바디 쿨네 도거라. 디바 디기드니 녜선숨로 튀기라. 디디 녜선숨 둥알기 규디 나랑기 닌 루이 롱적이 사라. 디디니 나랑기 루이 닌 루이 롱적 세 디링라더니 신샤제네. 신샤제기 율디 이 나랑 껴와지만 녜선로 튀기기 다 차서.
To put it simply, we can consider what the Bodhisattva Shantideva says in the Way of the Bodhisattva. He says that our actions actually act at cross purpose with our own wishes. And out of that, we experience great sorrow and suffering. So what does he mean there? He's saying that when we act purely for the sake of things we take to be real, our actions are mistaken. We can engage in wrongdoing to amass wealth, to protect dear ones and so forth. And our intention is to accomplish happiness. When we're doing all the things we do to protect our bodies, our loved ones, to be wealthy and have possessions, our intent is to accomplish happiness by these means. But they actually serve as the enemy to our happiness and yield suffering when they are motivated by reification and a fixated attachment. This means that while our mindset is to accomplish happiness, the efforts we undertake are at cross purposes and lead to suffering when we engage in wrongdoing due to this attachment to the things of this life. All of the efforts we make with respect to seeing things of this life as real, taking them as ends in themselves, when they involve wrongdoing, actually serve as the enemy of our future existences. So all of the things that we do that are actually harmful with the intent to benefit our body, our loved ones, our wealth and possessions, at the end of this life, at our last breath, they serve as the cause for negative rebirths. So any activities that we engage due to pride or jealousy, etc., for the sake of these things we hold dear, are nevertheless wrongdoing and serve as the cause for any of the three kinds of negative rebirths. So here we can see how even wealth, which we thought of, our intention was to gain happiness through this wealth, serves as a cause for unhappiness. And the reason for that is this fixated attachment that takes the wealth and possessions to be real, valuable in and of themselves. That is what turns these wealth, possessions, and the things we hold dear into enemies for our future lives.
라서 디인단들이 간서 체딜라 신배 왕도 미다과 말에 체딜라 신배 왕도 송나 되는 간서 시외 값도 단 겨와치마라 편배 담배 취디 둡괴 네버도 둡괴 담배 취디 마두 체딜라 신배 왕도 손에 직dem비 자와 디베레다 농마된길래 나라더니 미세 비지차 배설전에도 드네강라더니 미세 간데스트로서 하마고지 이 미세도 이머직 치와라 뚝 툭득 없었습니다. 동툭득 없어 Then Sidi Jibi Bezuldi Tangungi Milam Seven Nasi. Nile says on Milam di Yaldora. Then Sidi Jibi Segang Jibi, then Lega Sama, then Tangungi Nilam Seven Nasi, Chagres on Rangla Pemba Putan and Neva. Pemba Putan and Neva Gala, then teach you the Sasha with the body couldn't do. Kewachima Penjala Sabi, Gewasai, Gogabdi, Tonga Shore. Kewachime Dungur Gurgi with the body any. Teach the Sasha with the couldn't do to the S. Dig of Gane Young Relana. Then Namsa Kashab over the Busu. Chira Kandal to Young Reda. Nam Dansani, the Kushulosana. Pemes Shanasora. Dig of Dido Chagres on that. Chimala Pembe Giva the Madu. Any Kewachima Penjala Nebe didn't think but the dupe. Say Dilla Shincha Jene, any dupe shall be near Louis Longjasama, kept to you. Chidikasu, Nam Dasani Kushula Vadara. Namsa Kushula didn't Chida Kandala took Kanda Chida somebody you live in it. Tapshe Yamare Chisare on the Digaso. Do go the dubio, madam, do Magoya the dubio. The Indigosu the knee. Segang la Jebi lady, Tangi Milam Savan, Rangla Pemba Putam Yam Meba. Chadigasu, any Nam Dansani, Kushulo Banashi, Kanda Chida somebody, Gigi Dijimeva Chagres on it.
This situation is what happens when we are operating under the power of fixated attachment, reification of the things of this life. Reifying the things of this life again means to take them to be worthwhile in and of themselves, to take them to be real and nothing else. This means that the focus is entirely on that, without concern for how our actions will affect our future existences. So there is not a concern for necessarily accomplishing the genuine Dharma that actually serves all our purposes in this life and beyond. Instead, we become very occupied by prioritizing the activities of the world, worldly activities that lead to a state without much leisure for ourselves. We become very busy, involved in all these worldly activities. All of our efforts are directed at these activities because we take them in and of themselves to be real. But then what happens when this life ends? And all of the efforts we have poured into the things of this life, believing them to be real, are for naught. Everything is like a dream that we wake up from, and everything vanishes. After a life of busyness, pursuing the priorities of worldly activities, the moment comes when it is all gone, like waking up from a dream and the dream simply vanishing. Then all of the things of this life, which could have served for a beneficial purpose in accomplishing the Dharma, has, due to a fixated attachment to the things of this life, not been beneficial and actually served to accumulate habitual tendencies and karma that are causes for negative rebirths. Our opportunity to accomplish virtue and set up the causes for positive rebirth are now lost. There's nothing to be done about it. It's the last moment of this life, and there is nothing left to do but to pass into the next life. And it's said that this is like the sky and the earth turning topsy-turvy, one over the other. Everything is upside down. This brings a great sense of discontent because all our intentions were to accomplish goodness, but our actions were at cross purposes, like the earth being above the sky, everything is topsy-turvy. Instead of accomplishing virtue, we accomplished wrongdoing due to this reification of the things of this life, taking them to be real, turning the sky below the earth, and turning the activities we've engaged in this life into something that yields a negativity rather than the positivity we sought. At the time of death, there's nothing to do. When the Grim Reaper comes, there's no way to turn the Grim Reaper away. There's nothing else to be done. And when we have been operating through our whole life through a reification of the things of this life, we haven't managed to accomplish even a hair tip's worth of positivity that will lead us to favorable rebirths. This is the situation that occurs when we are dominated by a fixated attachment to the things of this life that takes them to be real in and of themselves.
Hola. Dito ni chiwi number di sabo ji komna. Tini kyose tabuki ala pingire. Di jungna tini sedi la shimbe nimbo. Layang sabcher dore. Nisukcher dore.
If we contemplate the form our death will take very clearly in this particular way, the sense of what that death will feel like, we will have a very powerful understanding of that moment. And when this arises, here again, we have the ability for that mindset to serve as a remedy here and now for our fixated attachment to the things of this life that takes them to be real in and of themselves. That's what allows that remedy to become not only powerful and effective, but very deep-rooted. It penetrates to the very depths.
Hola, string as the this is also delata during the shaggy. And indeed, said the Shimbapang Shimbat Logi Nimbola, the Chiwa Mitawa Gumsul to do shivere.
Our time is up for today, so we'll stop there. This has been an explanation of how it is that we are able to eradicate reification of the things of this life, having an attachment to them in and of themselves, and instead develop the mindset that remedies that fixated attachment by explaining the method of contemplating impermanence in the form of our mortality.
Hola, Tetrachum Jeve give it over the Rangi Simjan Tamjan Tumonde Jede, Rangi Simjan Tam Midawi Dushi, Jima, Main Bakula Kene, Sedila Shibato, Dambe Chula, Shishul Meba, Zumba Tabu Gune, Jum Gong the Pel Tarchine, Sangokuban to the Chedu Moa, the Monangi, Samjar Norashu.
Now, please gather all of the virtuous roots that have come from this listening to the genuine Dharma and share them, dedicate them to ourselves and all beings in a similar situation, that we and all beings may be able to suffuse our mind stream with an unfabricated, natural understanding of impermanence in the form of our mortality, such that it completely overturns, reifying the things of this life and gives rise to an unabated determination to accomplish the genuine Dharma that arises, increases further and further exponentially until reaching its consummate perfection in the state of Buddhahood. And please make the aspiration and dedication prayers that this may happen.
Have a nice day. Not a good night, draw.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. If all the recorders will stop recording now.